So it's been a little while since I hopped on this channel and posted anything. I guess no real reason for that other than just general malaise and laziness and down mood, and I guess that's a fitting segue into the film we're mostly here to talk about right now. But yeah, before we get into talking about Clerks 3, I guess it's just worth addressing kind of Clerks, or maybe even Kevin Smith in general, because it's the whole Kevin Smith filmography, or I guess really it extends beyond film. It's a whole personality, is one I've had an interesting relationship with over the last almost 25 years. I was too young to watch Clerks or Mallrats, or I think I even missed, I don't know if I was too young for Chasing Amy necessarily, but I don't think I was aware of it when it first came out, but it was in 1999 when Dogma came out that I can't even remember. I somehow ended up in theaters watching Dogma at like age 13. Not even sure how that happened exactly. I think it was just a very like random thing. Maybe I was a young atheistic teen, so maybe I heard it was critical of religion, religiously controversial, so maybe I wanted to check it out because of that. But yeah, and I loved it at the time, and went back and watched, I guess it was only 4 films then. It was only Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, and Dogma, and I got pretty into the whole thing. There was a brief period of time there, like I guess I'd be talking about a 2-year period, where Kevin Smith, I just about might have thought of it not necessarily as the best filmmaker out there, but just about my favorite in terms of the personality of his films, what he captured. Kind of a weird sort of because you had geek characters who talked about Star Wars and pop culture and things before Clerks, but the approach was is like your typical nerd characters, my glasses kind of characters, that sort of thing. Whereas in Clerks, you kind of you had characters that had a bit of a kind of slacker, kind of punk rock energy to them, who also had these nerdy interests. It combined them in a way that kind of felt where I reflected the way people I knew talked somewhat more. Admittedly, me and my cohorts in junior high and high school probably closer to the true nerd spectrum than the likes of Randall Graves, but nevertheless, Clerks itself, not the series, not the franchise, even, I guess, if you're extending to talk about the animated series and whatever other spin-offs there are, but the individual film Clerks, definitely it's in the holy tier of film for me. Like, I wouldn't say it's the films I've seen the most, like films I've seen the most number of times in any movies in my life, like talking 40 plus times, 50 plus times. That'd be like maybe your Ferris Bueller, Back to the Future, Rules of Attraction, some of the James Bond films. It's not quite in that territory, but it's like, one rung down the ladder. Like in the territory of films I've seen 15 to 20 times over the years. Like, I'm very familiar with Clerks. Can't quote every single scene line by line, beat by beat when I watch it along with film by any means, but quite familiar. I've seen it, many times. It's a film I'm intimately familiar with, and I think the energy of it is brilliant. I don't need to go into a review of Clerks here. If I want to do that, I'll do something on my main channel, something more proper. But and then Mallrats, I was a little less into, but I do, it has a fun vibe to it I like. And then Chasing Amy, I loved it a lot back in the day. One time I tried to watch it a few years ago, and I couldn't get quite as into it. I guess it didn't, it's analysis, kind of sexual, kind of philosophy, and the relationships didn't feel quite as fresh to me as it did when I was like 13, 14, first watched it, but it's still good. And Dogma, even as early as when I was, I think, 15, I guess I turned 16 in 2001, but I can't remember if it was before or after Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came out or not. But I think even as early as that, and quite frankly, I remember sitting in theaters watching that and thinking that it felt a little on the juvenile side for me as a 15-year-old. And it's literally the only movie I've watched twice, I think. I think I watched it then, I think like almost 20 years later. Probably literally 20 years later. It was probably a year or two ago, before the Jay and Silent Bob reboot came out, that I watched it a second time. So it's like, even by that point, and then you had Jersey Girl. By that point, the kind of Kevin Smith love affair was starting to fade a little bit already. And there's The Evening with Kevin Smith. I think that was in that kind of time frame before Clerks too. So already I was kind of like, this shit was really cool when I was a little younger. Already kind of drifting away from it a little bit, except for Clerks itself, which that is on the kind of sacred tier of films for me. I do think Clerks is fantastic. I have nothing bad to say about that film individually. I mean, Could you critique it? Sure. Amateurish actors, sure. The story structure doesn't necessarily hold, but I think it's just a must watch. At least its energy and vibe and the dialogue of it greatly appealed to me, all the way from when I was 13 and now when I'm turning 38, literally later this week. And then get to Clerks 2. And it's interesting because this seems on paper like something that shouldn't work. And I'm not even just saying that now in light of many other kind of reboots and revivals of many, many films and TV shows that have disappointed to one degree or another. Not all of them by any means. In fact, on the contrary, Cobra Kai is a reboot, and that's my favorite TV show going on right now. But a lot of them have, did anyone else watch the Gilmore Girls reboot? That was a little bit disappointing. And then, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, too much words have been spilled on YouTube about that. I don't even have any interest in adding onto that pile. And then plenty of others. There's just been a lot of reboots and revivals that are kind of not quite hit right. But Clerks 2, even at the time, must have been 20 years old going into that, 2006. I remember being nervous and then very satisfied. Like, I think it's, in a lot of ways, maybe the funniest Kevin Smith movie. Like, I remember just gales of laughter sitting in the theater and the audience watching that. Like, the donkey show, the mouth troll, plenty of other stuff, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars argument. I was like, he's pulling this off. He's pulling this off. Clerks sequel shouldn't work. These amateur actors acting alongside like more professional ones like Rosario Dawson, it shouldn't be working as well as it is. But start to finish, I find Clerks 2 is my second favorite Kevin Smith movie after Clerks. I thought the ending, they buy the quick stop, seemingly Dante gets with Becky, they're gonna have the kid, whatever. Him and Randall, they fight, but then they get back together. Fade out to the back into black and white in the quick stop. I remember thinking that was, I'm not saying it's a 10 out of 10 movie. I'm not saying it's a cinematic masterpiece, but as far as the Clerks saga, I thought that was pretty much the perfect ending. Like, never in the last, the 16 years between Clerks 2 and Clerks 3, did I ever really have any notion that, this needs additional story tacked onto it? Like, that was a great ending. That was a funny movie. It was an emotional movie. Pretty much worked start to finish for me, and it left off in a nice place, and and then after that, I kind of lost touch with Kevin Smith's filmography, and I did see Cop Out. I watched, Red State one time, and I did respect Kevin Smith making a movie that didn't feel like a Kevin Smith movie with that one. I was impressed that he managed to do that. Beyond that, it didn't do that much for me. Then after that, I pretty much totally lost touch with him. He did several movies in there that I haven't seen at all. Tusk, Yoga Hosers, and then got into this huge, podcasting career. I think there was, must have been thousands of podcast episodes of his. Never listened to any of them, haven't watched any of his talks in recent years, haven't followed any of it. Pretty much the last, before Jay and Silent Bob reboot, the last piece of Kevin Smith media that I consumed, I believe was... I can't remember if did Red State or Cop Out come out first. I think Red State was 2008, Cop Out was 2010. I'm not going to bother even clicking the two buttons on my laptop right now to look that up. I'm just going to say I think Cop Out was it. So there was about a 12-year gap in there of me, 12-year gap of me consuming zero Kevin Smith media. That is new Kevin Smith media. Like, I always go back and watch Clerks every couple years. Oh, and I guess I should shout out Clerks, the animated series. It's a good one. It's funny. I don't think it's on a masterpiece tier. I know there's some cult of it that holds to that esteem. I don't quite, but I do enjoy it. To this day, if anyone ever asks the question of who's driving, I, at least mentally, if not out loud, will always go, Bear is driving. How can that be? But anyway, so that brings us to, I guess maybe I should first mention Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which it wasn't even a movie so much as just kind of a 90-minute long inside joke. I chuckled. It was amusing. I didn't dislike it. Can't say it did a ton for me either, but it's okay. I think I gave it a 5 out of 10 on IMDb, which feels about right. It's my, its existence isn't offensive, but Now that brings us around to Clerks 3, which has been out for quite a while, but I just finally watched a couple nights ago. I was kind of like stealing up the courage to watch it, I think, to some extent, because part of me knew that Clerks 2 didn't really need a continuation. It served very well as a duology, the ending of a duology. Much like a Terminator 2, didn't really need a continuation. Part of me was kind of hesitant to watch Clerks 3 because I heard at some point that it was going to be about... Can I say the C-19 word on YouTube without getting a weird notation on my video? I guess I'll just whisper it just once and find out. COVID. I heard at some point, I heard some online rumor that it was going to be about that, like the running a convenience store during the C-19 saga. And I don't want to watch any media or fiction that has anything to do with that. I even quit watching shows that became about that, like a Superstore at some point. Like I don't want to, I think of that as like the worst time of my life, basically. So I don't want to, anytime like a movie even mentions it, I just like tense up, like, no, let's not address that. And it's just pretend it never happened. So, but then I saw the preview and for Clerks 3 and it didn't seem to be about that at all. So I was like, okay, maybe that was just a weird rumor. And indeed, it never is mentioned at any point, which, props for that. I didn't want to deal with that in some movie that I would watch to enjoy myself. But that said, did I necessarily enjoy myself? Well, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit of Clerks 3 real quick. And yeah, this whole podcast, I guess we'll just call it, is just going to be spoilers start to finish. I'll consider everything after the sentence is over. Every frame of Clerks 3 to the end credits is a fair game for spoiling. So this is a pretty bleak movie. I guess it's a comedy in the sense that there's wacky stuff with Elias converting from Christianity to Satanism. There's Star Wars jokes. I think there's a few Marvel jokes in there. Randall swears and stuff. But by and large, this is pretty bleak movie. This is a movie with a fairly bleak tone. And there was, of course, always bleakness undercutting the humor in the Clerks saga, save maybe the animated series. But obviously Clerks, when you mention Clerks, maybe the first scene I think of is at the end. I think it's 2 scenes before the end credits when they're lying on the floor of the quick stop after they have the fight. And he says, we work in a convenience store. You think you're so important. A monkey could do what we do, etc., etc. And, there's a hint of bleakness even in that monologue. Like, we're not important in this universe, right? We're not doing anything significant with our lives. We're slackers is kind of the undercurrent of it, which continued on to Clerks 2 to some extent. Like, now we're, in our 30s now. We work at a burger joint. And even at the end of that movie, it has a happy ending in that they kind of come back to a place that they were comfortable at with their lives, running a little kind of mediocre convenience store. Is it a big, important existence? No, but, they found a sense of zen there. They could sit and bullshit with each other all day. It was a very modest ending to what I thought for many years was the end of the saga. It was nothing great. They didn't become famous celebrities. They didn't become millionaires, which kind of does happen in this movie, I guess. It was a modest and acceptably realistic ending in the context of realism of a movie with, donkey sex shows and Jay and Silent Bob and a, semi-fourth wall breaking dance number and so on. But it was believable, But now we come back to Clerks 1 and 2 where they had bleakness and a bit of kind of a melancholy in a way that I think anyone who isn't mega successful could relate to, I guess. Like, not quite feeling totally satisfied with your lot in life, not feeling like what you're accomplishing, what you need to be, feeling like some of the people around you are NPCs or stupid and so on. And I think it did a good job capturing that in a way that I can certainly relate to. I mean, there's been no point really in the last near 25 years of my life I couldn't to some extent relate to not being where I wanted to be in life. But then Clerks 3, we kick in almost instantly with Dante's wife and child died in a drunk driving accident. Okay, I'm not saying that doesn't happen to people. I'm not saying it's not a realistic thing for some people. It's just, it doesn't have a universal relatability in the same way. I can't relate to that. That's never happened to me. It's never happened to Kevin Smith either, so I don't know quite where that came from. It was very strange. It was like, it felt like the sort of thing they would do to write out Rosario Dawson if they didn't have her, but they did have her. She's in, 3-4 scenes in the movie as a ghost, which is a bit, that kind of metaphysicality of that is not something I really associate with Clerks. I mean, I guess it's in the View Askew universe, in the Dogma, might have stuff like that, but in Clerks, it felt kind of strange. It was like weird. Like they have this, maybe they didn't have her like for much of shooting. Maybe she was shooting other shit. Maybe she was shooting fucking Mandalorian or whatever. I don't know. But they could have just had her be at home or something. And if they only had her for like a few days of filming, and that would have been fine if she didn't work at the quick stop. The idea, there was enough ideas in the movie already with Randall making a movie about Clerks that it just felt like too many flavors in the fucking pudding, too much on the plate, too many contrasting things on the plate. Like this, it's still, on some level trying to be a comedy about filmmaking in this case, to some extent, a nostalgia piece looking back on the series, almost a little too much maybe. Like it felt like it wasn't forming its own identity, even compared to other nostalgia pieces like Top Gun Maverick, or I mentioned Cobra Kai. There are flashbacks too, and looking back on the previous series before they got rebooted, but it didn't feel quite as start to finish, kind of just like a retrospective on itself as this did. But then you throw in this whole like super bleak, just like tragedy about like dead wives and dead children, and just crying and breakdowns and weeping at grave sites, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this is just like upsetting, man. This is an upsetting movie. This is this makes like the Banshees of Inisherin look like upbeat and cheery, man. What the fuck, Kevin Smith? And I know this kind of stems from his contemplations on his own mortality with the heart attack stuff, which is, like I said, I never followed any of his podcasts or public appearances or anything in a very long time. So all I knew about the heart attack was really what I saw on the news, what I saw on fucking like YouTube or Reddit or whatever. But yeah, I know that happened, is the thing that happened, but it's like it reflected too much in this movie, frankly. I felt like these characters, like, I'm not saying there's not room in the cinematic landscape for movies about aging, mortality, dying. Those are things that happen there, things we'll all face one way or another. I don't know, I guess not everyone ages, but then again, I guess these characters didn't age either, because it's weird. They say they don't give an exact age for these characters in the movie. I think they both, Dante and Randall, identify themselves as being, quote, almost 50, which I guess, what were they, like in their early 20s, and Clerks 1 in 1994. So I guess they'd be about 50, but I think they both say they're not even 50 yet. So what, these characters are 48, 49 years old in this movie? It seems like kind of fucking young to reflect on your mortality. I don't know about you, but like I said, I'm turning 38 soon. In 11 years, I'll be an older person. I accept that. Maybe won't be able to have quite as much stamina as I do now. Maybe there'll be some wrinkles. I don't know. I could go gray. I could go bald. I don't know. But I don't plan to be like reflecting on dying quite yet. I don't know. It just seems kind of young for that. I don't know. It's just, and then it's not, everyone's getting heart attacks. People are getting killed in drunk driving accidents. People are crying. And then the fight that, it's kind of fucked up. Like the last conversation that Dante and Randall ever have before Dante dies of a heart attack is like a big blowout argument about how he ruined his life, and I felt like they did that better in the jailhouse scene in Clerks 2, which I thought was an excellently played scene. I thought the acting in that scene, the writing in that scene in Clerks 2, where he says, Dante says, "I'm just going to forget the last, 33 years ever happened." And Randall's like, "Oh, wow." And Randall's like, "Wow, that's it, huh?" I thought that was an extremely well-played scene. It's a scene I clearly remember. It had an emotional impact on me right after the comedy of the donkey show sequence. I thought that worked so well. And here, I don't know, like the only joke really in the movie is that it feels like, well, like there's Star Wars references. Great. I feel like those all kind of stand in the shadow of the Death Star contractors conversation from the first movie. There's Jay messing up, being bad at acting and bad at making the movie, and it's funny the first couple times that it gets a little overplayed. Then I guess there's the whole audition sequence, which feels kind of like, look at all the famous people Kevin Smith knows. Like, okay, yeah, cool. There's Ben Affleck. There's Anthony Michael Hall. Yeah, some celebrities. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I don't know. I was just left with, and I guess I don't. So I'll say this: it doesn't irritate me quite in the same way as filmmakers coming in and killing off what I consider to be other people's characters. Namely, like J.J. Abrams and Ryan Johnson coming in and killing off the Star Wars original trilogy kind of core trio, killing off James Bond. I guess Ian Fleming hasn't technically written James Bond in any direct way in like 60 years, but even so, I was kind of like, well, that seems kind of fucked up. I don't know. And in this case, I will say Dante Hicks, he's absolutely Kevin Smith's character, top to bottom, no question about that. Kevin Smith created this character. He wrote this character. He owns this character. This character's his. He can do whatever he wants with it. So I wouldn't say it's like disrespectful in the same way that other reboots, the way they've treated their characters. It just feels like, man, like it's so bleak, you know, and it erases almost fond memories that came before too, because we see in the movie that Becky, Rosario Dawson's character was named Becky, right? We see her gravestone, and she died in 2006, the year Clerks 2 came out. She had to, I guess, because the baby in her, she was pregnant when she was killed in the drunk driving accident. So for 16, 17 years now, I've just been happily thinking that the Clerks saga had a happy ending, but over in the alternate universe of the View-esque universe, the Clerks saga, no, actually, it's been a disastrous and heartbreaking tragedy this entire time. That's almost worse than what Star Wars did with the Empire immediately returning as the First Order. It's almost worse than that, because it's like retroactively now I can't enjoy the end of Clerks 2 really in the same way that I have been ever since I first saw it. I guess the only thing I could think of to relate to that almost would be like Alien 3, where suddenly Newt and Hicks are like killed between movies after Aliens, where you have this near perfect movie, I think, in the form of Aliens, that's largely about saving this little girl from this planet. Never mind, she died anyway. Fuck you, Ripley. This is almost like the same thing as fuck you, Dante, and fuck you, people who enjoyed Clerks too. So that's really fucked up. I don't know. It's just, and I could understand someone saying like, you can't take bleak movies. You can't take. No, I like a lot of stuff where characters die in the end. One of my favorite TV shows of all time is Spartacus on Starz, and I guess a spoiler alert for history, you can look up how that war ended, and that's reflected in the TV show. No, the TV show Spartacus had a rather downbeat and sad ending, but it's one of my top 5 favorite shows of all time. I like a lot of movies that end with the main characters dying. I guess I won't go through and name them one by one because it would be kind of spoilery, but they certainly exist. I mean, there's been plenty of shows and endings that I think have done well with a bit of bleakness. I've always been in favor of. I actually liked when TV shows started like getting the courage to kill characters off. When you had shows like Buffy and 24 started like bringing that in, something you wouldn't see in older shows. Unexpectedly, just tragedy happening to characters. I'm all about that. I'm all about it, and kind of like, I guess I've like been trying to write kind of fantasy novels myself lately, and I'm fairly brutal with the cast. Not everyone makes it out alive. I can have a little bit of a mean-spirited kill streak in me when it comes to likable characters, you know? But in this case, it just felt like this isn't an action saga like 24 or James Bond or a fantasy saga like Game of Thrones or Buffy or anything like that. This isn't about war or villains. This is just kind of a mundane story of people in the real world, more or less, with exaggerated elements. Like I said, in Clerks 2, you have your donkey shows, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm not, again, this level of tragedy does happen to people. It's not entirely made up. Heart attacks are real. Car accidents are real, Drunk driving accidents are real. Piling it on like this just felt like it felt very jarring. It was like putting like you're putting the shoe on your foot and there's like a sharp rock inside. Like, Jesus, what the fuck, man? Like, it's kind of like, it was just an unpleasant kind of sit through. And I'm not saying I laughed a few times, but definitely not as much as I laughed at my first viewings of Clerks 2, that's for sure, or even like Dogma, Yeah, or maybe even not Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is kind of a slightly embarrassed laughter. I think watching that in theaters when I was like 15, I was kind of like, oh, this is so stupid, but I still had a few chuckles. But in contrast, yeah, Clerks 3 was just, it was a tough watch. It was yeah, you had Kevin Smith just seemed to have like some dark thoughts in his mind when he was making this film, and they definitely shone through. And it's yeah, it's kind of like a bitter end, and it's yeah, it's on the list of things, kind of reboots that I find myself wishing maybe they had just let Sleeping Dogs lie on. Like yeah, the ending of Return of the Jedi will always be the preferred ending of Star Wars to me. The end of Rise of Skywalker, I'll say that much. I mentioned Gilmore Girls. The end of season 7 of that show was a much a warmer and nicer place to leave off to me than the ending of the Netflix reboot they did a few years back. I did think that Ghostbusters Afterlife was a nice enough continuation. Are they making a sequel to that or not? I've heard mixed things. But, you know, yeah, I don't know. It just this is one where I kind of wish they had left it. Yeah, maybe I just kind of wish Kevin Smith had never returned to the View-esque universe at all. Like, Jay and Silent Bob reboot, it wasn't a hateful experience. Like I said, I had a chuckle. I was like, this is fine. This movie's existence is acceptable to me. But I don't know, when it was just like kind of looking aside from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which like I said, I've been mixed on ever since I saw it in 2001. But like that body of work that was just like Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Clerks 2, I was like, that's a really good body of work, regardless of whatever comes after that. Clerks 2, not just as an ending to the Clerks saga, but just that little mini cinematic universe in general. I was like, that's great. That's such a good cherry on top. That's such a good closing of that door. It's just put a bow on it, wrap that, put it under the tree. You did good with the View-esque universe. Now I feel like it's something with a very grim ending. I don't know. I kind of like, yeah, just it's this movie just left me with such a bitter taste. Not even bittersweet, because yeah, there's been a series that left me with a bittersweet taste. I was like, yeah, that's a nice way to leave things. Like yeah, like Rocky to some extent. That series, there's always sad stuff happening. You know, Rocky Balboa was the last film for a while that had in some ways a sad ending with Adrian gone and Rocky dealing with his grief. But the taste ultimately left me with was bittersweet. Clerks 3, on the other hand, it's so bitter. It's such a ending of just like, man, that sucks. That sucks. That's really upsetting. Yeah, I don't know. And just two guys who are supposed to be like, 48, 49, having heart attacks back to back like that. Just seems like it's, I don't know. I'm just having like a tough time dealing with the movie. It's just like, it's like, I would love to say like, I just watched Clerks and Clerks 2, that's fine. But now like Clerks 2 is like almost a lot harder to enjoy, knowing that 5 minutes after the credits roll in that movie, Rosario Dawson was killed along with the baby by like a drunk driver. It's like, Jesus, Kevin Smith, like what the fuck, bro? I don't know. That's really messed up. I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm probably just rambling on at this point, but yeah. I guess there ain't gonna be a Clerks 4. I guess that's a wrap on it, and yeah, and I guess the epilogue, which was very weirdly just like spoken by Kevin Smith over the end credits, said Randall lived to age 90 and became like a famous cult filmmaker or something like that. That's cool, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I just would have rather the movie focused more on that and less on whatever was going on with Dante's death and Becky's death. And yeah, it was weird. It was a weird one. It was a weird movie to watch. It was a kind of an uncomfortable viewing experience, and just even beyond that, I felt like, frankly, the quality of acting had declined from these amateur actors between Clerks 2 and now, which I guess makes sense. I mean, the gap between Clerks 2 and Clerks 3 is longer than the gap between Clerks and Clerks 1 and Clerks 2, you know? So it made sense, but it just like almost made it contrast even more strangely when like a professional like Rosario Dawson showed up. So yeah, I don't know. Clerks 3, not a movie I walked away from with much of a positive impression. It's like, I don't know. Maybe it would have made more sense if literally Kevin Smith had made it like another 20 years later, you know, like if Kevin Smith made this movie in the year 2042, and it was about, a 70-year-old Dante and Randall, maybe then Dante dying, I'm like, okay, this is a fair time to reflect on mortality, but at this point it just seems so strange. I don't know. But yep, it's done. Dante Hicks is dead, and his wife and child are dead, and that's the end of Clerks. I don't know. Yeah, that's I think any thoughts I have beyond that are gonna just kind of ramble on and on. I can't speak as well as Kevin Smith can in his live shows where he can go on and on for hours on various topics. I guess I've kind of rambled myself out of things to say here, but yeah, Clerks 3 as I guess that's quite likely where we're gonna leave the US universe, right? What a grim little button on something that was enjoyable for most of its run. Yeah, all right, well. Yeah, I just decided to hop back on this channel. It's been a while since I posted anything on this channel. I've had a few ideas, but I don't know. I just kind of, I felt like I kind of rambled myself into a place of like depressive nonsense with some of the vlogs I did about my own life earlier. I felt like, and they weren't even particularly getting views or anything. I just don't think anyone gave a shit about any of it, so it's kind of like whatever. And I thought about doing kind of a rambling podcast review of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but there's 50 other. Not 50, probably 500 other reviews of that game on YouTube already, so nothing much for me to say, but I'm sure I'll be back at this channel again to ramble about something. It's most of the, these movies that every movie review channel talks about, usually whatever latest Disney product is, the various superhero movies, whatever Star Wars is doing, whatever else, the movies that have 8 million videos made and posted about them. I just I don't feel like pissing in the ocean and talking about any of these, but Clerks 3 had not quite as much said about it, and I was just kind of sitting here. I was just I guess I can't say the movie didn't affect me, because I am still thinking about it a couple days after watching it, whereas a lot of movies I kind of forget about and move on from roughly 3 minutes after the credits start rolling. But whereas Clerks 3, I am still kind of dwelling on it, so I guess it did affect me in a way, but I don't know. I mean, if someone walks up to me on the street and punches me in the face, that certainly affects me. It's not necessarily a good thing now, is it?